Matthew Moore's Wood Studio, and in this project we're going to be building some shop cabinets for the shop. Now, why? Well, take a look. This cabinet here has been inundated with stuff on top of it, and instead of storing stuff on it, I want to be storing parts for my projects. And I've got this beautiful section here of drywall that's just ready for a cabinet to be hung on it. And then over here, right next to my drill press, I have a cabinet that holds all my bits for the drill press. And again, on top of it, it's become this like collection of stuff. And I've got some beautiful wall space right behind it for a great cabinet. So let's get started. The first thing I do is get a sheet of 4x8 plywood, and I start cutting it down to the depth that I want for my cabinets. I want the cabinet to be 12 inches deep, and I'm adding an extra inch for 13 inches, and that's to include the 1/2 inch back and 3/4 inch French cleats. After my rips, then I turn to cross cutting. For the drill press cabinet, I'm cutting these side pieces to 24 inches tall. For the hanging cabinet, that's going to be 32 inches tall and 31 inches wide, plus the width of the two sides. After cutting all those parts, then I reset my fence so it's 3/4 inch away from the blade. And now what I'm going to do is make cuts on both the sides, the top and the bottom parts until I create a groove that my 1/2 inch piece of plywood for the back is going to fit in. And as for the depth, I'm only going for about 1/4 inch deep. So now I'm here at the bench and I've got all of my parts out, the large cabinet and the small cabinet I'm going to build. Now what I want to do next is to take my square and, using actual boards, get a depth stop for the thickness of these boards, and then lock that down, turn my board over, and then draw on the outside, showing me the thickness of the piece that it's going to attach to. And do that on all of your side pieces. And then come in and make marks where you want to set your screws. And then bring your square in and mark the center between the 3/4 inch and the outer edge. And the crosshair mark that you'll make will be where you want to start your drilling. And then I raise my panels up and I pre-drill my pilot holes in all of my sides. And this allows me to come back with a countersink bit to create the countersinks for my screw heads. And I take one of my sides and my top, I get it on my bench, and I start by squaring up the top part using the clamp it jig from Rockler. And then I grab another clamp and square up the bottom by clamping across the entire length of the top piece. And then I drill a pilot hole and follow it up by screwing my pieces together. And then I repeat that setup on the other side. And then I repeat the exact same thing on my smaller cabinet. Since I've got everything lined up really nice and flush, I'm just going to come in and throw another clamp across it and not worry about getting it square, because my blade's square and everything's going to meet nice and square here for the second side. And then I come in just to double check everything and measure the width, which for the large cabinet is 31 inches, and I add 1/4 inch of width to account for my grooves. And then I take a measurement for the height, subtract 3/4 inch, and then add back 1/2 inch. So in total, just subtracting 1/4 inch. And I do the same thing on my smaller cabinet. And then I head over to the table saw and I take my piece of 1/2 inch plywood and then I rip it to the width in between my grooves for the larger cabinet. And then I cross cut it to length. And then, using the remaining amount of 1/2 inch plywood, I come back in and I rip it to width for the smaller cabinet, and then I cross cut it to length. Once I slide those 1/2 inch panels in, I screw together the rest of the case. Now that I have the back of the cabinet in, I can reference from that and drill the holes for my shelf pins. I then take a measurement for the width and height of the largest cabinet, divide the width by 2, and rip a piece of 1/2 inch MDF on the table saw to that width. And then I cross cut my pieces to length, starting with the larger cabinets first, and then moving to the smaller cabinet, and then I rip that piece to width. I'm going to start with the cabinet laid on its side for where I want the door to open. Then I'm going to use my square to draw a line 1 inch in. These are the hinges I'm going to use for the doors. And then attach your hinge so that it's flush to the edge of the case. And then I bring my piece of MDF flush to my case and draw the edges of my hinge. And then I draw a line 7/8 of an inch in from the edge and attach the hinges to my case, lining up to my lines. Now for the larger cabinet, I'm going to install all 4 hinges onto the cabinet portion on all 4 sides. Then for the big doors on the big cabinet, I'm gonna do the same thing like I did in the smaller cabinet. Draw the outer edges of my hinges and then mark a line 7/8 of an inch up and then attach my doors on each side. And I'm not expecting them to fit for the first time. As you can see, there's a little bit of overlap here, and that's on purpose. I cut these a little bit long so that when I put them on, there'll be a little bit of overlap and I can cut them down the sides. So I'm just gonna come in with a pencil and mark right where they're meeting the case. And as you can see here, the two doors are really just touching. There's no gap between them. So when I take these over to the table saw, I'm gonna remove about a 32nd of an inch or less from both sides. And then cross cut them to length. Now I'll install the magnetic catches at the top of the doors, and I'm going to come down 1 inch from the edge of each door. Then I'll take measurements so I can transfer the distance for the aluminum catch to the door. And then I transfer those measurements to the door and drill in the other half of the magnetic catch. With the doors reattached, I'm going to come in and mark the points for my handles. Bring up my handle, put it right on the lines, mark where I want to drill my pilot holes, and attach my handles. With the handles all finished, now what I'm going to do is take my two cabinets, lay it on top of my assembly table, take the handles off, and apply some amber shellac to the doors to match the rest of my cabinets. And then if my blade set at 45 degrees, I cut a couple pieces of plywood to create some French cleats. I rough cut those to length, screw in 1/2 to the top of my cases, head over to the locations where I want to hang the cabinets, find and mark the studs, roughly around the height I want to hang everything. Transfer the stud locations to the center of your other half of the French cleats. Transfer those lines all the way to the top. And since the larger cabinet has 2 studs it can go across, I'm going to put a mark in the center, height-wise, of my French cleat after the 45-degree cut. Now for the other cabinet, I have a mark down the center of the piece, and I'm going to need to put 2 screws in here since I'm only going over 1 stud. And using a Forstner bit that'll accommodate both the bolt and the head that I need to tighten the bolt with my wrench, I'm going to come in and drill my holes so that I can countersink or sink below all of this below the piece of 3/4 inch plywood. And then come in and drill my pilot holes. Then over the bandsaw, I trim those pieces to length so I can center my cabinet along the studs. And then I will get my French cleat nice and level and screw it to the wall. And then I'll come and hang my cabinet. And then go ahead and put your floating shelves in and all your stuff into the cabinets. Now this corner shop is much better organized. I even got my Miller's Falls number 2 and number 5 inside the cabinet, and it's great. I can close the door, do a whole bunch of work that's going to create a ton of dust, and then open it up when I need to later, and everything inside of it is going to be nice and clean. And over in this corner, I've got everything off the top of the cabinet into the hanging cabinet and really well organized. I even put up my straight edge and my level over here. And I love how I got the double doors here. I can just grab one side of the cabinet or both. Now you can definitely finish these cabinets and get them hung in a day. I was working on finishing up the Nakashima coffee table build, putting the last coats of finish on the tabletop, and that's why it took me 2 days. If you want to check out the companion piece to this project, where I build a rolling cabinet just like the cabinet next to me and the rest of the cabinets in the shop, I'll have a link in the description below. Please subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and hit that thumbs up button if you like this video. If you're watching this on Facebook, hit the like button, share your timeline, and head over to the MM Woodsio page and like us there as well. And as always, have a great week in your shop.